He didn't shatter television by being nice. He did it by being precise, by saying what everyone else was afraid to say, and by understanding what the ordinary viewer at home actually felt in the first 10 seconds of a performance. That's how Simon Cowell rewired Saturday night TV across continents. That's how he turned unknowns into household names, and then into global industries. But when the lights cut out, a far harder story waited for him. One written in loneliness, controversy, broken bones, and the kind of quiet regrets no trophy can mute. The legend is familiar. The cost is not. He came into the world in 1959. A boy in London, with two very different markers on the wall. A father who measured worth by outcomes and a mother who carried glamour like a perfume you could almost touch, but never quite hold. Praise was rare, expectations weren't. He grew into a kid who pushed back at authority, who didn't shine in classrooms, who felt the sting of being present but overlooked. Those early days taught him two competing truths: that approval was a locked door, and that stubbornness could be a key if he kept jamming it into the lock long enough. The family connection helped him land a mailroom job at a giant label. It wasn't a dream, it was humility with a stapler. He fetched coffee for people who didn't ask his name twice. He sorted piles of fan letters for artists who would never know he existed. He learned what power looked like up close, not in the songs themselves but in who decided which song got heard, which face got pushed, which single got one more spin on the radio, at the right hour. He learned that the spotlight is a product, not an accident. He also learned how it felt to leave a floor and cry in a bathroom stall, because you weren't just invisible, you were replaceable. He walked out once. The world didn't cheer, it shrugged. So he came back, carrying the weight of that shrug. That could have been the end of it, but humiliation has a strange chemistry. In some people it curdles, in some it hardens. In him it turned into an appetite. He began to watch for patterns. He started noticing how ordinary people responded to hooks they could hum on the way to work. Not how critics wrote about importance a month later. He became fluent in the one language that decides who wins on a Friday memory. There's a science to what you still remember when you brush your teeth at night. He took a shot on his own label. He tasted the good version of fame, the easy smiles and the soft glow of short-term wins. But trends are ocean water, beautiful, then gone. His little empire folded. Debts stacked like dishes in a sink no one wanted to wash. Friends thinned out, pride thinned with them. He moved back into his parents' house. For a man raised to measure himself by outcome, it felt like a verdict. You had your chance. It wasn't you. He has admitted that this time almost broke him. Not just financially. Identity isn't a logo. It's the story you tell yourself about who you are. When that story collapses, sleep becomes a fight. But something else formed there, in the quiet after failure. He stopped trying to impress tastemakers who sneered in the back of the room. He focused on the front row, the people who actually buy records, hum choruses, stand in line on release day. He signed acts that serious critics mocked. The numbers mocked the critics back. Hit after hit, he discovered the oldest truth in any market. The person who understands the customer better than anyone else usually wins. The victories didn't erase the label cheap, but they did something more important. They paid for the next step. Television arrived like a side door that suddenly led to the main stage. When he sat behind a desk and said exactly what a million viewers were thinking, he clicked into cultural gear. It wasn't only the meanness meme, it was the accuracy. When a performance was flat, he said it. When a voice was built for arenas, he said that too, without poetry, without fluff, in a way that felt honest even when it hurt. The first show exploded. Then the next. Then the next. A format became a franchise. Then a global framework owned in part by the man who designed the attitude that powered it. He wasn't just a judge. He was a gate with loud hinges. He was the one you had to pass. He became for a while what the press loves to crown: the most powerful figure in the most democratic corner of entertainment. Power shaped the days into sharpened hours. Auditions that looked short on TV were marathons. Notes, edits, meetings that ran into other meetings, public fights, private negotiations. And somewhere inside that machine, isolation grew. Stardom doesn't make you lonely. The schedule does. When every evening is booked and every weekend is a production, friendships drift into draft folders. The public saw the smirk, the high waistline, the tight black shirt. The private life saw silence that got loud. He has said there were times he felt alone even in a packed studio. That line lands because everyone who's ever won a room knows the feeling of going home with nobody to tell. Then came the scandal. You remember the headlines, the names, the filings, the angles. When the story broke, he became the judged, not the judge. He didn't spin much. He admitted what he could and let the storm blow. And then something happened that rewired him more than any trophy could have. He held his son. Newborns make noise that cuts through noise. Fatherhood didn't fix the scandal. It reframed the man who walked out of it. The tempo changed. Schedules bent around bedtime. A man who once flew because planes existed started flying less because story time did. He has said his priorities flipped. Empires shrink to scale when a small hand grabs your finger like it's a lifeline. Loss threaded through those years. 2. His father died before the big wave broke, and that regret stayed with him. The wish that a hard man who raised a hard son could have witnessed the softer way the world finally said his name. His mother died after the wave crested, and that grief knocked him out of the rhythm of work. He paused shows. He let himself be a son, not a mogul. There was an interview where he said losing his mum was the hardest thing he'd been through. It's a simple line, but it hits, because it doesn't try to be bigger than the truth. His mother, Julie Brett, died in 2015. Production on The X Factor was delayed while he grieved. The body keeps score. And fame doesn't negotiate with physics. In 2020, he tested a new electric bike in the courtyard of his Malibu home, and the test bit back. He fell hard. Vertebrae broke. Hours in surgery. A metal rod. Pain that doesn't just sit in a chair. It stands in the doorway of every morning and asks if you're sure you want to try again. He said later he came within a minute of not making it. Whether that's literal or the way survivors describe near things, the truth underneath is the same. It was close, too close. The Guardian reported he broke his back in Malibu in August 2020 and underwent surgery. Recovery is boring and heroic. It's elastic bands. It's careful steps. It's sleeping in positions you didn't know were positions. It's learning to laugh at how long it takes to sit up. And just when the scar tissue begins to feel like part of the map, he crashed again. Another e-bike fall. Another hospital. Another humiliation headline. The mogul who fell twice. The second accident didn't come with the same mortal fear, but it arrived with a quieter enemy, doubt. A reminder that control isn't a switch you keep in your pocket. News outlets reported a broken arm and a bloody mess of a landing. The images weren't kind, but pain never is. ABC, Variety, and other outlets reported the February 2022 crash and broken arm. At the same time, another narrative bubbled. His face. People noticed changes. Then more changes. Then the kind of changes that the internet loves, because it can point, laugh, and scroll on without consequence. He had experimented with the modern toolbox, fillers, injections, small lifts. He eventually looked at old photos and didn't recognize himself. The line is his, not ours. So he stopped. He said enough. Let the chemicals go. Let the mirror be the mirror again. That choice didn't just end a cosmetic phase, it signaled a different relationship with public opinion. If they were going to talk, let them talk about a face that matched the weather of the life that made it. He has said he went a bit too far with fillers and stopped. See People in Vanity Fair. Reporting in April, there were professional storms too. The criticism that the formats got predictable, or that talent shows built instant fame that couldn't last. Some of that critique sticks, some of it misses the point. You can't expect a show designed to draw families to a sofa to be a conservatory. The show isn't the art. The show is the door. A lot of singers who never would have gotten near a microphone in front of millions found their door because he built it. The biggest names from those franchises filled arenas, crashed platforms, and shaped playlists for a decade. That's not an accident. That's architecture. Then came the kind of news that flips a day into a year you never forget. In the autumn of 2024, reports broke that Liam Payne had died at 31. The public went numb, then divided, then numb again as confirmation came in. For fans, it hurt like a stolen future. For him, it cut deeper. He wasn't just a judge in Liam's story. He was the man who slotted the pieces of a boy band into a machine that changed youth culture for a generation. He grieved privately. He pulled back from projects. He held his son tighter and he watched old audition tapes with a softness that the internet never sees. Loss is most devastating when it collapses the distance between your past curation and your present helplessness. Sky News reported reactions and confirmation coverage in October. By 2025, he stands differently. Not smaller, quieter. He still sits on panel shows, but the edge is now paired with a kind of mercy. He'll still tell you if you're off key. He'll also tell you why it matters to keep trying. After Payne, the game isn't being right. It's being useful. His morning starts slower, with routines designed to protect a back that reminds him of physics. Reading glasses appear more. Long days cost more. He manages his health with the same seriousness he once reserved for quarterly meetings. He doesn't chase every camera. He chooses where to point the few that still matter. The mansions are still there. The Malibu surf, the London quiet, the city view across a park. The cars exist like a museum of fast decisions. Private flights happen less. Symbols remain, but their function has changed. The point of the thing isn't the thing. It's what it allows and what it no longer demands. People still write about the number attached to his net worth. They always will. What interests him now is what that number can unhook in other people's lives. Years ago, before his son was even born, he said he wouldn't pass the fortune down the usual way. He talked about legacies that give opportunities, not just accounts. He's repeated the principle since: charity over inheritance. Values over vaults. You can disagree with the model and still respect the logic. He said in 2013 he intended to leave his fortune to charity rather than to his child. Reported at the time by Sky News and others. But the most important shift isn't in where the money goes or where the camera points. It's in where he places his attention. A younger version of him looked forward to the next launch, the next premiere, the next ratings record. The present version looks down at a small hand and tries not to miss the joke that would have been lost if he'd flown out that morning. He used to optimize schedules. Now he optimizes presence. Pain taught him that. Grief taught him that. The mirror taught him that. A 6-year-old cheering on his father's shaky first steps after surgery taught him that. Does that mean the steel left him? No. Watch him. When an audition goes off course, he still finds the exact sentence that tells the truth without wasting time. He still knows when a voice can't hold a stadium and when a voice will close one. But the verdict now carries context. Instead of making a contestant feel small, he's more likely to point them toward the one change that might keep them in the race next week. Harshness produces memes. Guidance produces careers. He wants more of the second. None of this turns his story into a sermon. He made choices that scorched parts of his life and hurt people. He has said as much. He also made choices that opened lanes for artists who would never have been let onto the road. He is not a villain and not a saint. He's a man with a louder microphone and a longer list of scars than most of us, operating under lights that magnify both. If you trace his arc from the mailroom to the boardroom to the hospital bed, a pattern emerges that might be useful even if you never stand in front of a studio camera. First, rejection is information. It tells you where the appetite isn't. Listen to it, then move toward where it is. Second, clarity beats charm. Viewers can smell fake kindness and staged outrage. They trust specificity. Third, power without a boundary collapses the person who holds it. Work that devours sleep will eventually devour meaning. Fourth, the body calls all debts due. Don't make it send a collector. The controversy over his face is a cultural X-ray. We ask public figures to stay young forever, then punish them for trying. We say be authentic, then mock the wrinkles authenticity requires. He got caught in that trap, stepped out of it, and took the jokes on the chin. That's not heroism, it's adjustment. But adjustment is the part of maturity nobody claps for, and everyone benefits from. The grief that shadows his parents' absence doesn't go away just because another series gets renewed. It shows up in unexpected sentences, in softened tone, in the way he talks about what matters now. He said losing his mother was the hardest thing. That's a sentence you only hear from someone who has crossed the middle of their life and knows exactly how thin time can feel. His reflections after Julie Brett's death in 2015 were widely reported. The near-fatal fall reframed risk. The second crash reframed embarrassment. The online pylons reframed image. The death of a young star he helped launch reframed legacy. Put those together and you get a different kind of power. One that doesn't require constant proof. He doesn't need to win every headline anymore. He needs to show up for the small moments that add up to a life he won't regret when the credits roll. What about the Empire? The formats still move. New faces rotate in and out. The shows spawn moments that slice into the culture and get shared by people who don't even watch television the old way. For all the criticisms about predictability, the talent show remains one of the last mass-market rituals left. A place where a family can sit together and experience suspense at the exact same second. He helped preserve that, not because he's nostalgic, but because he knows the economics of attention. If you can make a grandmother and a granddaughter talk about the same voice, you have built a bridge that the rest of media keeps trying to drive across and falling off. Look closely and you'll notice a new habit. He says, "I don't need to be everywhere." That's a confession and a plan. There's a gravity shift that happens after a certain kind of pain. You stop chasing every next and start curating the few that still feel like you. You make fewer phone calls and spend longer on the ones that matter. The industry calls it pulling back. The personal life calls it finally breathing. He remains a polarizing figure, which is fine, because blandness never built anything that lasted. Even his critics admit that he set a standard for on-air honesty that most copy and few match. Even his fans admit that some seasons felt like they were playing yesterday's song on repeat. Both can be true. Things that scale always risk sameness. Things that survive always require reinvention. He's doing the second at the speed the body allows. There's a line from early in his career he kept to himself for a long time. Sell records first. Earn respect later. It sounds cold until you hear what he meant. Connect with people, and the rest will follow. He applied that to television and built a ladder anyone can climb if they have the lungs for it. The other line he's repeated in different forms is simpler. "I want to be useful." That's the sentence of a father, not a mogul. It's also the sentence of a survivor. Toward the end of any story like this, audiences want a bow. They want a moral. He resists the bow. He knows his life isn't a parable. But if you pressed him, the lessons would likely be plain. Be fearless in the room, kinder in the hallway, protect your back, literally tell the truth fast. Don't chase youth in mirrors built to sell you something. Choose presence over prestige when the two conflict. Put your money where your mouth says your values are. Years ago he said he wouldn't leave his fortune to his son. And people argued about it online like every stranger was suddenly a family attorney. The point wasn't cruelty. It was strategy. He believes legacy is opportunity multiplied outward, not softness multiplied inherited. Agree or disagree? You can't say the position was vague. He stated the charity over inheritance stance publicly. See contemporaneous reporting. If you strip away the headlines, and the seasons and the stage fireworks, you're left with a father trying to read under a lamp that makes his eyes ache some nights. A man whose back stiffens on cold mornings. A face that looks like a life lived in public, and a mind that still spots a hook in 8 seconds. You're left with someone who won big, paid big, learned slow, and now moves with intention. So here's the final beat, not shouted, just spoken. The real victory wasn't the ratings. It was the recalibration. The ability to step out of a role he invented and become a person who can sit quietly in a room and not feel like the air is failing him. The ability to pick up a Lego and not think about flights. The ability to watch a young singer tremble and decide to say the line that helps rather than the line that only trends. That is a different kind of genius. Less cinematic, more durable. And if you're asking what to do with all of this, it's simple. Steal the useful parts. The clarity, the speed, the willingness to take the hit when you're wrong. The discipline to stop when the mirror tells you the truth. The instinct to hold on to what matters when the road tries to shake your hands loose. Because lights fade, numbers fall. Even legends trip over handlebars. What stays are the people you made braver and the nights you didn't miss. Simon Cowell built an empire of auditions. Life auditioned him back. He made the cut. And now, the show he cares about most doesn't need a camera. It needs a couch, a laugh, a story at bedtime, and the kind of legacy you can't film but you can feel.